Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. And joining me is someone who's not mediocre at all, in her lovely striped blouse, Dr. Susan Nash. Hey, Dr. Susan, how are you today?
Very stripy. Thank you.
Stripy.
Glad to be here.
Well, we haven't been on in a couple of weeks. We had a major problem with a Microsoft update that literally took us out with Win 10. We tried reinstalling it 3 times. Even the beta of Win 10, nothing fixed it. We're back to 8.1. Now it works beautifully. So it happens. Anyway, let's run our intro and then let's introduce our guest. Here we go. And we are back. Now, today we've got a guest who is in our world, Susan. He plays in the same sandbox we do, and that's always fun. The e-learning, the training world. It should be a lot of fun talking about what his company's done, and he is the co-founder and president of the company, and his name is Srikant Vasan. And Srikant, how are you today?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you, Rick?
I'm very well. I'm glad you could come in a last moment. We were scheduling Srikant for a show recently, and by the way, pardon my background, it disappeared somewhere in the production, and I have no background. It's just me floating in air.
But well, at least you don't have clutter.
I don't have clutter. It's just totally empty behind me. But anyway, Srikant is in the e-learning industry, and he actually was very kind to show up last minute with us because we had to cancel actually rescheduling of today's show. And Jacqueline, who's sitting right next to me, she coordinates a lot of this. She asked Srikant if he could come on. He did. So we really appreciate you coming in last moment to share some of what you do and your story. And it sounds interesting. You've developed a new company, SkillStore. Tell us a little bit about SkillStore.
Sure, happy to. So SkillStore is a relatively young company. It's about a year old. And we started this because we found that despite all the value placed on soft skills like leadership, communication, management, and so on, that the ways that people use to train people on these leave a lot to be desired. In fact, various estimates say about 85% of the training of the money that's spent on it is wasted. And we decided to do something about it. So my co-founders and I, we used to actually lead a nonprofit online college that I had left the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to go start that college. And we were focused on helping low-income Americans find their way to quality college degrees. But we just found that there's a bigger need out there that we can get to in a much more scalable way. And the need is quite simply to find a better way to develop people's skills across the populations, people who work in companies, people who are looking to find jobs in them. And we think we found an answer that we're quite proud of. So that's what we started talking about publicly about a couple of weeks ago. We've been working with some leading companies like Western Union, SAP, and Comcast and others to help build out the product. And it's actually being used now in about 40 different countries around the world. And we, as I mentioned, just went public about this a couple of weeks ago. So happy to talk to you about that as well as what led us to it. So I'll let you take it from here.
That sounds great. Well, congratulations also on what you're doing.
Thank
Susan,
you.
You're smiling, Susan.
It's a blast.
I am smiling because I'm just really excited. I always like to see people come up with better solutions to soft skills training. And I totally agree with you, Srikant, that what happens is that you see the same old. You have either people trying to do things face-to-face, and that has, some efficacy, but it's not on demand. And then you have modules where people tend to do multiple choice or whatever. But I'm interested to know what you're doing.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head. I think that's really what led us to doing this. As I mentioned, on the one hand, everyone agrees that soft skills are really important, but then you go and ask people on the front lines, whether it's a manager or a frontline employee, and they say 9 out of 10 of them say, well, we don't have the preparation we need to succeed in meeting the business challenges for the organization we work in. And to get to your question, I think part of what we see, the reason why 80% of the training is wasted is, as you said, instructor-led training is great when it works, but it's really costly, and it's really both in terms of time and money. So most companies are lucky if you can pull the people out of their jobs for a couple of days a quarter or a couple of days a year, and that's really not the kind of on-demand, ongoing learning that you need to have in order to really build these skills. So that's sort of the challenge with instructor-led. And e-learning, as you said, is great for various things. It's, for compliance training, for regulatory training, product knowledge, systems knowledge, all of that works well. But when you're talking about something where you need to have these skills which you build by interacting with other people, it's pretty hard to do that with the traditional e-learning. So what we're doing differently is, first of all, we put the learner in control. The learner spends much of the time not necessarily just watching a video or answering some multiple choice questions, but really practicing answers and how they would act in the real life situation. So it's a lot of scenario based learning where you get presented with a scenario, then you record yourself on a video, and you then present it to some of your peers who can provide you feedback on it. And that 360-degree view of figuring out how you would perform in a particular scenario, letting others watch you do it, and then provide you feedback, and then you get to do the same for others in your community. So it really creates sort of a peer-to-peer social learning community within an organization, so various people with similar roles can help each other get better. And then there's also some tools which let you get into live role plays through video chats. So much like, you do a FaceTime video chat or a Skype video, like the one we're on right now, instead of just using it for communication, we think we can apply it for training purposes, where you can get two people together and have them actually do a role play where one person acts like a manager, say, and another as their employee, and then they can go at it together so that they basically perform the role play and then provide each other feedback, and then the whole interaction gets recorded and uploaded in the cloud, and the third person comes in and watches and provides you feedback. So that's sort of at a high level what we do, which is really learning by doing in the truest sense of the word, and learning together, so that you're learning not just by yourself and your computer, but you're learning with other people who are there to help you learn and get better.
Okay, so I have a scenario, and this is a real one. Okay, so a student of mine is doing her final project on pets in the workplace. There's like therapy pets or companion pets, but obviously there are going to be, in trying to implement that, there are going to be all kinds of conflicts. So think about, can your program system accommodate scenarios that would say, I want to bring my boa constrictor to the office?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Short answer is yes. Long answer is, we have a catalog of modules that you can get started with, which have some of the more commonly found situations. So maybe we don't have one on boa constrictors yet, but we do have one on, how do you do behavioral interviewing? How do you probe for details when you're hiring someone? How do you set goals for your team? How do you offer informal feedback or formal feedback? How do you manage your time better and prioritize work, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a bunch of things that you can start with off the bat, right? But then most clients that we work with say, hey, that's a great place to start, and we'll get going with that. But then we have some specific things that are pertinent to our specific circumstances. So if it's about bringing that boa constrictor to work, then by all means, we can help add a module that's precisely about that. And then you can go to town figuring out how to deal with that situation.
Now, Susan, I don't like spiders and snakes that much. Let's move on. Now, Srikant, do you create all your own content, or do you also work with content providers to work with the platform?
Both.
Okay.
Both, really. And in fact, so far what we've found is the initial set of customers that we work with, we certainly, as I mentioned, start with some of the catalog that we have created. But at the same time, they also come in pretty much most of these cases, they come in and say, this is great. And by the way, we have this whole library of content that we have developed over the years. And we don't think really content is where it's at, so you're welcome to use this content and load it up onto your platform so that it really becomes the takeoff point for all these practices and interactions. That's really the heart of what SkillStore does. So in other words, we can work with our own content or with either customers or third-party content to bring it onto the platform and really use that as the basis for what's really differentiated about us, which is the practice, the feedback, and the role plays. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. That sounds good.
I think it makes a lot of sense too. And what I like about it is that you can customize it for your particular industry. So, for example, transportation industry could be different than mining.
Indeed. Yeah. And at the same time, that's entirely true. At the same time, you have, some basics. I mean, how you set goals, how you sort of probe for details in an interview, or how you offer feedback, etc. There are some things which are just sort of cross-cutting. So there's value in sort of getting the best of both worlds, some of the cross-cutting content as well as the specific content that's specific to your industry or your company.
Now, something people are probably going to ask is, this sounds like it's a whole learning platform. Does it also include the learning management component of it?
Depends on sort of where you draw the line. We have sort of focused on the core learning moment, because we found that a lot of learning management systems are often there to serve the needs of the learning professional, the training and development professional. So they have a ton of stuff around, content repositories and storage, distribution, SCORM compliance. There's a whole bunch of things around managing users, etc., etc. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel there. We think there are enough LMSs there, and we want to play well with them. What we're focused on is the core of how you effectively build soft skills. So it's really around that core element of it, and then we can work with learning management systems for this stuff that we don't necessarily think that we are any sort of particularly unique in. We're focused on some of what makes us unique there.
Okay.
I liked your question, Rick, because I was thinking that too, like Moodle, for example. I can see how you could work this into Moodle, but then also take advantage of Moodle's automatic gradebook and generating certificates and badges. Have you worked with Moodle?
Not as of yet. No, we obviously know them. In fact, we had more interactions with them in my previous work at both the Gates Foundation as well as the college that I used to lead, and it's quite prevalent, as you know, in higher ed. But we haven't had many interactions with Moodle with this company so far.
Not that it'd be necessary, but I like the fact that you're flexible, so that essentially you have a product that can be dropped into anything.
Well, especially if you're thinking about, some of these soft skills, people skills, management skills, etc. That's sort of where we hope that people will think of us as a differentiated product which can actually build these skills that are critical for job and life success.
Now, so I have a new LG V10. Here it is. It's huge like this, but it is actually huge and hefty. But can I do this with my smartphone? This is an Android.
Yes. As long as it's Android or Apple, iOS, yes. We haven't gotten around to the other mobile platforms, but if you have a phone or a tablet in one of those two platforms, which is really more than 90% of the smartphones out there, you can work with it. So you can just simply go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the SkillStore app, and you'll be off and running. In fact, because we just came out recently, through the end of March, we're essentially offering a free forever for anyone who signs up. They get up to 6 modules from our catalog free, so they can go see for themselves, as well as any of their teammates they want to add. And it could be a team of 5 or a team of 5,000. So we're welcoming anyone and everyone to come in and check us out. And until the end of March, it's free.
That's a nice offer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the Play Store right now. SkillStore.
I don't know, Susan. Boa constrictors and LG phones. I'm trying to get that connection, but.
Well, just don't get the phone too close to the mouth. It might eat it.
I think you'd have to muzzle a boa constrictor, and then you'd have to, like, if you have small dogs, I mean, you'd have to have a dog and snake policy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I see it. Here it is.
But I don't know that I've ever touched a boa constrictor. So.
I haven't either.
I have. I had one wrapped around my neck once. It was in South Beach.
You would. You're gutsy.
No, later I thought, what was I thinking?
Yeah, just make sure they're not hungry when they get around your neck.
I know. I mean, he or she was not hungry, apparently, or like I was the wrong, like, I wasn't snack size.
So Srikant, I'm always curious when I meet people like you, what your background is. Is it more on the training side, or you're an engineer, or do you combine, different skills to come up with the idea?
Well said. I would say it's kind of hard to describe because I've done a few different things over the years, and both in the for-profit and the non-profit world. And I guess the one common theme is, if I try to figure out what makes sense, it's usually about finding ways to expand human potential. So I started an educational software company about 15 years ago, grew that and sold that. Then I worked in the corporate world, building a product which is now used by millions of people in the retail sector to essentially run store operations workbench for companies from Walmart to Ross stores to JCPenney to Sephora and a whole bunch of others in between. And that was something that we basically started to help retail employees run their stores better. And then I spent about 8 years in the nonprofit world, first with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, working with smallholder farmers in Africa, all the way up to working in higher ed here in the US. And then, as I mentioned, a year and some ago, we started SkillStore. So it's a bit of an eclectic background, but as I said, the primary thing that's the thread that runs through it is around sort of finding ways to expand human potential.
That's great. That's great.
Oh, I like that. That's wonderful.
I like the eclectic backgrounds. When you meet entrepreneurs, there's always different things. There's a thread, and I think I can see the thread in some of the things you've done. It's always kind of fascinating. It's good.
What I like too is that right now you're in Denver, so you understand what's going on in the oil industry and the basic carnage and mass layoffs over and over. And I'm noticing that there are lots of people who are trying to say, okay, here we're going to offer you soft skills, how to interview, how to polish your resume. We're going to get you with a headhunter. But that doesn't really work when there are no jobs and there's no consulting. So I've been focusing on how to build your own opportunity. And what I like about your modules is that they can help you. You can select and say, okay, well, I'm going to be involved in conflict resolution as the boa constrictor attacks the poodle. Then I need to figure out that, and then because this is my business idea. So I can see how you can use your components to help better actually operationalize someone's dream. And I was wondering, for example, what would you recommend in terms of basic modules for people to take?
Boy. I would say I welcome people to, if you go to skillstore.com, write down a few part of in fact, I can even share my screen and show you if you'd like.
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, let me see if I can figure this out. Give me 1 second.
And by the way, the website is www.skillstore.com.
And here's what it looks like on Android, in case anybody cares to look. Anyway, so
yeah.
I'm looking at, you have, for example, emotional intelligence. Oh, and I like the teamwork, working in teams. You have, and then, to me, what I like about it is that, for example, teamwork, many business opportunities are great, but they're not really consulting. It's all about coming up with a team solution and combining interesting skill sets. So, for example, a geologist, an engineer, and say a business finance person can team up to come up with ways to identify underperforming wells, and then to come up with a solution and find a way to finance it. And that will take team efforts. And it also takes planning. And what I like about what you have too is that ostensibly you could come up with it's not just random things that you're taking for no reason, but you can have it to really advance your vision and your goal, and it's grounded in something concrete, like a project. Or
Indeed. I don't know if you can see my screen. I can.
We do. We do. You see, it looks good.
Okay,
It
great.
does.
So just as I just went down the home page, and to answer your question, you have, these are sort of at a high level our programs, but you click on any of these, you mentioned working in teams, you can find the specific modules here like leading meetings, forming teams, setting goals, prioritizing work. There's a whole bunch of modules here. You can look at all of these. You can go back and check one of the other, how do you hire the best? Etc. There's a number of modules here. That's one way to sort of figure out which modules might be most relevant to you. The other is if you were to go in and just sign up. I think I showed you, actually, let me go back here. All across the website, as I mentioned, for people who sign up at the end of March, it's free. So you can go ahead and sign up. And if you do that, you'll essentially see a bunch of modules that you can add. You can sort of create your own team by clicking the Manage My Teams and so on. But just to give you a sense for what the experience feels like for someone who is a learner. So when they come in, if they have been assigned a certain number of modules by their learning and development person or their manager or what have you, in this example, you have things like the behavior in interviewing, setting goals, etc., offering informal feedback. If you were to click on any one of these, it starts to get into some of how what we do is a bit more than what's the typical way of learning. So on the one hand, you get a quick overview, which is something that you get from most. You get a quick bite-sized video lesson on the core concepts and a quick summary, and you can do quizzes. So I can go quickly through some of this so you see what it is. But it's really the practice, the observed practice, and so on, which it differentiates us from what's out there. So again, just to give you a quick run through, you can watch the lesson and you can maximize it. And as you can tell already, Susan, you downloaded it while we were talking, so you can get this from the Apple or Google stores. But you can
Anxiety,
do a quick
nervousness,
lesson.
and fear. These are the emotions that employee feedback tends to conjure up in most people. Many of us do not like to give or receive feedback.
So I won't bore you with all the details here, but you get the idea. It's a quick hint as a way to know what's out there. You can then, get a quick summary, so you can use it as a job aid when you're wanting to come back to this, say, 3 months later. You can do a quiz, which lets you understand sort of a quick set of multiple choice questions and ensuring you've demonstrated that you understand the concept. But then, so far so good. I mean, a lot of companies and products do this. But here's sort of where we start becoming different, where you get to then apply it right then and there, so that you're not just sort of watching a video and answering questions, but you're presented with a live scenario in this example, which lays out sort of what the situation is. And it could be about boa constrictors at work or what have you. But you understand what it is and you say, yeah, I'm ready to start recording. And then right after that, it just fires up the video camera on your phone or computer. As you can see, basically I'm now looking at the video camera on my computer. And if I were doing this for real, I would look through these questions and basically say, I'm ready to do this. I'd start recording myself. And then basically it starts recording my answer to the scenario. It could be a few minutes long, what have you. Just typically people take a few notes and do a better job of answering the question than I'm doing right now. But at the end of this, once you've done all of this, you say, okay, I'm ready. I think I've got this. Let me stop. And immediately it goes up and gets uploaded onto the cloud, right? And in seconds, you'll see that you have it available for you to watch yourself. So and then basically it starts recording my answer to the scenario. It could be a few minutes long, what have you. This typically people. So you see it's instant feedback. I practice myself. I watch myself in real life watching the video, right? And I look at this and say, you know what? I don't think I got this quite right. So I can just re-record it, and I can do this as many times as I want. So if I were to re-record, I'll go through this. But at some point, then you say, I'm ready to do this, and then I just submit it. And when I submit it, then it goes up into the cloud and gets presented as a practice that one of my colleagues in my company or my learning community will get. And then what they would see is something like this, where when they click observe practice, right? they will see the question and someone else in my community, so it just happens to be someone else in my company who has recorded their own practice here. So, and I can watch
So an upcoming event that I would like to describe is a upcoming client call with someone who I have spoken to and set up a meeting with, either with Srikant or with Peter. When I do engage in...
So as an example, so you see how they answered a question, right? And let's say I've watched all the way through to the end. And so this is sort of where that 360-degree feedback, I watch the whole practice, I say, yeah, next. And then I'm presented with a very structured rubric that helps me evaluate how my colleague did. So it takes some of the guesswork out of it, and it's not as simple as saying, hey, how did Rick do? Instead, it's which of these 4 behaviors did Rick just exhibit? And that lets me sort of provide more constructive feedback. At the same time, it helps me because this rubric, as you can see, is a way to translate the content of the lesson into the theory around how it's applied in a particular scenario. And by virtue of answering this in the context of what someone just did, I'm not only sort of reinforcing the content which was in the lesson, but I'm also helping the learner connect the theory with the practice. And I'm also providing the other person the feedback on this. Does that make sense in terms of just overall how there's various modalities of learning here? You get a quick overview, you watch a lesson, you get the summary as a job aid, you demonstrate understanding through the quiz, you practice by yourself, you can observe the practice. And in fact, let me go back to the Skype. And if you were to do this, it's available in our web, in our mobile version, not yet on the web version. You have that video chat functionality I was telling you about, so you can get into a live video chat with a colleague as well.
That's
so
actually
hopefully
good.
that gives you a quick sort of overview of the features and how we're focused on interactive learning and learning by doing. So you're actually applying these lessons in a safe environment in a realistic scenario.
Yeah, that's great. It makes
is
a lot of
great.
sense.
I like the underlying theories. I mean, they're pretty clear.
And then you integrate with LMSs so that they can, for example, launch the content from your site, but then they integrate it back through cross-domain or whatever into the LMS, so you can keep track of what people have done, what they've taken, or you can even assign content to them, correct?
We aren't quite as sophisticated on that as we'd like to be yet. We're still early in the days, but that's certainly, I mean, where we're going with this. So the basic idea is, you can launch the content from the LMS, but also provide all the data and the reporting so that can also be used to keep track of how learners are progressing within various LMSs.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very impressed.
Thank
Very,
you.
very
Thank you.
intuitive.
Uh-huh. We've worked hard to make that happen, and I think you'll see. I mean, I was able to show you the web version by sharing the screen, but hopefully you'll validate that when you see it on the mobile phone or other mobile devices, it's very easy to use.
I was actually impressed that your webcam was shared by 2 devices, by 2 different programs. Usually that blows up, so I was pretty impressed with that one.
There you go.
Yeah, look at those little techie things. It's like, hey, that worked. That's cool. When you did that, I went, oh no, it's going to blow up. No, it didn't. That's good.
That's right.
That's good. Well, we are pretty much about at the end of our time. Can you tell people any seminars or shows that you're going to be attending soon so they can meet you there in person, or how they can get more information on the product?
Sure. I mean, the easiest way is just to go to www.skillstore.com, and there's a whole bunch of ways there to reach us. You're also welcome to email me at my first initial last name @skillstore.com, SVASAN @skillstore.com. And we will be at the ATD conference that's coming up here in Denver, but,
Okay.
and a few other places as well. Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, Srikant, we wish you the best of luck with this. We'll put a lot of that information in the show notes as well, so people can get a hold of you. And thanks again for coming on. That was really actually pretty interesting. And we always like to see what people are doing out there. And this looks fun. And I think you've got a good idea here. And just to kind of wrap up, because we do call this Life Edge. What do you think some of the things gave you that edge in life to make you successful, to make you come up with things like this? Because obviously you're an entrepreneur, and that takes a certain mindset. What made you become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it took a while, to be honest, because I think I grew up in India, and I was a first generation college kid. And so for me, just getting into college was a big thing because neither of my parents had been to one. And then once there, the natural thing was to go find jobs at, I guess the next thing was to go and get a business degree, which I did. That's what brought me to America. I went to the Wharton School and got a business degree there, and then went and spent a couple of stints with well-known companies like McKinsey and Company and Media One, etc. So it took me until I was 30 before I actually became an entrepreneur. And I think, frankly, it was because I was still in that sort of risk-averse mindset because of having grown up in a place where there was a lot of poverty, and I hadn't sort of grown up around a lot of people who had gone to college. And so it was a way to ensure that you had enough stability in your, so that's sort of what kept me busy till I was 30. But then I think heart of hearts, I've always been a risk taker and an entrepreneur, and wanted to have always had visions about how the world could be better in certain ways and find ways to make that happen. And I think it took me up till about when I got to 30 to have the courage to jump off and do that. And that's more than 15 years ago, and I guess I've never looked back. It's always been sort of one wonderful ride after the other. But I think that also ties back to why I spend most of my life trying to find ways to expand human potential, because I know I wouldn't be sitting here, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you if it hadn't been for that college I was lucky enough to get into, and one step led to another after that.
That's great. That's
It's
great. Well,
extremely
congratulations.
inspiring.
Yeah. And congratulations on the company and all the projects you've done. And this sounds like a good one. Sounds like you're doing really well. You're well focused on making this happen. So our best wishes for you, and I'd like to have you back on again in the future. Tell us how things are going, where you've gone with it. We'll keep us as a resource for you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
It's a pleasure.
yeah.
And great to talk to you both. I've enjoyed your podcast, and it's great to be on one.
Well, great. That's good. And so if you are watching the show, please subscribe, give us your feedback. In the show notes, we will have Srikant's information so you can get a hold of him. And definitely take advantage of that special he's got through March. That's a pretty good one. So get a little bit of 6 courses, unlimited training. That's really good. So Srikant, again, a pleasure having you on. Good to meet you. And we will see you next time. Thanks again.
Great. Thank
Susan,
you. Take
till
care.
next time.
Thank you, Srikant. Great
Take care.
show.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.